Having done a U-turn on immigration, Labour tried to switch the focus of attention to relations between the races.
Can you stop the machine?
Investigations had already begun to reveal that discrimination on the basis of colour was rife.
When I worked for Panorama, we undertook one investigation into the colour bar on the railways, because it was absolutely clear that the railways were not employing black people.
It's much harder for a West Indian to get a job in Britain today than it was a year ago. But how much of the trouble is due to colour prejudice? Is there any colour bar on British railways?
No, there is no colour bar on British railways.
I went down to the station master at a big London station.
This is Mr. Davis, the goods agent in charge of Smithfield Depot. How many vacancies have you at the moment?
It's 9 vacancies for staff at the moment.
Next day at Lambeth, I met 4 unemployed Jamaicans. They had been looking for work for weeks. They weren't skilled, but they could read and write, and as far as I could judge, they were intelligent and had good records. So I suggested that they should go to Smithfield to ask for the jobs which the manager had said were vacant. They went there on Thursday morning. They were turned down. I went straight back to Mr. Davis for another interview. Now, Mr. Davis, you have vacancies here.
Oh, yes.
But now, 4 coloured men came this morning to ask for jobs and they were turned away. Why was that?
I see.
He was denied that there was any discrimination, but the plain fact was that the unions didn't want it, and management went along with it.
Now, why is it that there is a prejudice here against coloured men?
Oh, there's no prejudice, Mr. Chataway.
But no official information existed about the extent of racial discrimination in Britain.
The government set up a small unit to go around the country to all the local authority areas which had large numbers of immigrants. We also made a point of visiting major employers. They were quite happy to employ coloured people, providing they weren't visible. In other words, if they worked in the kitchens, that was all right. But employers felt that shoppers wouldn't like to see coloured hands handling food over the counter. They thought that ladies wouldn't be happy to buy their underwear from coloured girls.
To get black people in shops, we actually had to get the cooperation of one of the key persons in the Oxford and Regent Street Traders Association. And this person said to me, if you can find me, and I want you to listen carefully, 4 pretty black girls, pretty in quotation marks, I will employ them. And then my colleagues will follow.
One minister who had personal experience of the extent of racial prejudice was Barbara Castle. As Overseas Development Minister, she entertained Commonwealth politicians, including Malawi's Hastings Banda.
He was my least favourite Commonwealth Prime Minister. He was running a dictatorship in Malawi. He was sidling up to South Africa. He was disliked and loathed by other Africans, and he certainly was by me. But he seized his opportunity to draw me up to him and put his cheek against mine and show us apparently canoodling. Well, I was very angry because he'd no right to do that. But of course, the Express seized the opportunity, and there was this enormous picture the next day on the Express showing this embrace. And I received the filthiest and most racist letters I'd ever received following that. I mean, with the people had cut out the Express photo. One wrote across it, disgusting. Another said, nigger lover. One letter said, if these kind of things can take place in public, heaven knows what goes on behind the scenes.
Roy Jenkins, the new Home Secretary, came to the job determined to legislate against discrimination.
I had a sort of agenda, a liberal agenda, if you like, which I had set out in a little Penguin special, which I had written for the 1959 election. It had a final chapter called Is Britain Civilised? And I set out a number of things which I thought would make this country more civilised. Race relations was certainly there, and in a sense it was a very important one.
However, the police were far from delighted by Roy Jenkins' liberal agenda.
One of the most difficult meetings I've ever done in my life was a thing called the Metropolitan Police Boards had a sort of day out. They all turned up in Westminster Central Hall for what I sometimes a sort of bacchanalia in the evening. And they were objecting to a lot of liberal things which had gone through. They didn't like the end of capital punishment. They didn't like the end of flogging. But the one thing which really got them excited was when I said there is no doubt that we have to contemplate having a substantial black or coloured element within the police force. And they screamed for about 2 minutes then. Never forgotten that.